Thanks, Kiri. It's lovely to be doing this for the PRCA for the summer series, and all of this leads up to our end-of-year purpose report, where we will be collating insights from these events. And for those of you who have joined us before for the youth group or the environmental panels, welcome back. Throughout the third session, we're going to be discussing progressing with purpose and how brands use creativity and innovation to drive change. Everyone here has taken time in their diaries because they care about the issues we face. We'd love to make it a more interactive session. So please do send any questions, whether for the panel as a whole or for individuals. And over to you, Daniela.
Great, thanks so much, Chloe. Welcome everyone, nice to have you here, as Chloe says, for the last of our series. If you've got any questions at the end, we're going to have our panelists talking for the next 30 minutes. If you have any questions, do please submit them in the Q&A chat box on the screen. We'll leave about 15 minutes at the end for a Q&A session, and we'd love to hear from you if you've got any specific questions for everyone or just for a particular individual. Unfortunately, Jeremy wasn't able to join us for the session today. He had to pull out the last minute, but we have two fantastic panelists here today who I'm sure have lots to say and lots to discuss on this issue. So Smruti Sriram is the CEO of Bags of Ethics, the world's largest ethical manufacturer of reusable bags and eco-packaging. And Cathy Watts, she runs her own business specialising in destination marketing and events, and is currently working as the programme manager for host cities at global youth leadership organisation One Young World. So what I'd like to do is just sort of start off with an initial question for both of our panellists, and just to then also give them the chance to introduce themselves in a bit more detail, talk about themselves and their organisations, and then in that context answer the question. So maybe Smruti, I could ask you first, how has your company been innovative and creative in your approach to driving social change to date? And how do you see this has changed with COVID, with everything we've been going through recent months, and what's been your response?
Hi everyone, my name is Smruti, and thank you so much for having me on this panel. And I agreed to join because I believe passionately about businesses and organizations and charities to be a force of positivity. Supreme Creations is actually our mother company name, and Bags of Ethics is our brand label. And it's great actually to be introduced as Bags of Ethics, because that's what we've come to know as very publicly over the past few months. So if I give you a bit of background, it's a family business, and my father is a chairman and founder, and it really boils down to core principles and the founding principles of a business that can be based on social values. So the business manufactures reusable packaging, most famous for our tote bags that you get under your kitchen sink right now, I'm sure, when you go shopping. And we've helped to reduce several billions of plastic bags around the world. We service clients like Tesco and Asda and Sainsbury's. And many years ago, about 15 years ago, my father built a purpose-built factory in Pondicherry in South India. And when he did that, he had the vision. I'm an only child, I'm a girl, and he's been extremely passionate about supporting women, and made a pledge that the majority of the workforce in the factory should be women, those of whom could support their families with pride. And so when he built the factory, the big TV adverts in the local area to advertise for tailors and merchandisers and machinists to be for women. And 20 years on, actually, we have a 90% female workforce. And we designed the factory so that it was created to have very sustainable principles. So it's created in a way so that there's a lot of energy flow, which is sustainable. So wind power, reduction of electricity consumption. The inks that we use in our manufacturing are the best in quality and don't pollute or harm waterways. And the product that we make never uses any single-use plastic. And this has been our mantra for many, many years. And it's not because we're eco-warriors and we don't have, consumer-based lifestyles. It just is driven from the fact that if we're going to produce something, we'd rather produce something which is a bit better for the environment than polluting the environment. And I always have a problem when claims are made about sort of sustainability, but I think it's also really important to not shy away from some of the credentials that you do have as a business. So we were the first fair trade accredited manufacturer of reusable bags for the cooperative in the UK. And we really went above and beyond the principles of fair trade. And hence we developed the label Bags of Ethics. And Bags of Ethics stands for 3 Ps, people, planet, and product, which seems very simplistic. But I think whenever developing a brand, it's really important to have a very strong and clear brand identity, because as your business evolves, you don't quite know what the product may be. You don't quite know what the service might be. But if you're very clear on your values and your DNA and your principles, that will become your guiding light. And so much so that in March earlier this year, I'd actually just returned back from a trip to the factory in India. I was doing some filming for International Women's Day, and it was quite remarkable because that was just at the start of when COVID was breaking out in the UK, and we didn't quite know what the consequences of COVID-19 would be on the world. And what I did was I made this very public and verbal commitment to the factory staff when I was there and filming for International Women's Day. We made this beautiful movie of the women in the various different roles and chose to celebrate everyone from packing to stitching to merchandising. And I said, this is going to be a fantastic year. And little did I know that, we were going to face a global crisis where the majority of our business is actually working with events-based organizations. So we supply London Fashion Week, we supply Cannes Lions, we supply massive events like Web Summit. And overnight, a lot of our business became on pause. And I'd made this very public commitment to the factory women and the factory men, saying that we're going to have an excellent year. And very quickly, we decided, how can we help in this crisis? So coming back to the Bags of Ethics principles of people and planet and product, we actually answered a call to action from the NHS, who were desperate for PPE to be produced. And they were asking for who has globally very large tailoring and manufacturing capabilities. And we said, oh, we do. We have, several hundred machinists and several hundred, machines that can produce a lot of PPE if required. But as we went through the process of getting the specifications from the NHS and the Department for Health, we realized that a lot of the materials and a lot of the items that were needed were disposable, and our machines were just not set up for the fabrics and materials that are used in disposable gloves, disposable masks, disposable gowns. And we very quickly realized we might struggle to hit any of these specifications. But what we did do was speak to our friends in Japan. And we said, look, do you think there's a possibility of making a face mask which was more long-lasting, more reusable? And Japan, of course, and many Asian countries, East Asian countries, have the culture of wearing face masks. And so through a lot of product innovation and working with lots of scientists across the world and material technologists, we actually started talking about reusable face coverings back in April. And so we had to pivot as a business from producing predominantly reusable tote bags to suddenly working out how to produce this tiny little piece of material that you put on your face, which seems very simplistic, but actually is exceptionally complicated. And face coverings seem very on vogue right now, or even a bit passé, but back then it was a very unknown entity. But what we did have as a vision was to be very clear that we just didn't want to engage with single-use plastic masks. We wanted to have something which would reduce plastic consumption, which can be made out of organic materials and can be reused by the public, but that could also celebrate design. So it again boiled down to our principles of people and planet and product. And I'm sure we'll discuss about, and no plastic.
No
Yeah.
plastic.
Well, no single-use plastic. And so it's been an absolutely sort of big roller coaster for us, but our current project is a very large-scale one where we're supplying big UK retailers like Sainsbury's, John Lewis, Boots, Waitrose, ASOS, and a few others, as a joint partnership with the British Fashion Council to celebrate great British design through the prints of our reusable face coverings. And a very key principle that we've always held over many, many years was to make sustainability quite affordable, because I think many sustainable brands either have very low production runs or maybe overinflate the cost of the raw materials of it being organic or fair trade, which they do have a premium, but sometimes they're escalated to a level which becomes quite unaffordable for a mass consumer. And so we made it very clear that this project that we would undertake, which we call the Great British Designer Face Coverings, it was called the Great British Mask Project, but that we had to quickly change that because masks became a very confusing term for the British government. We wanted it to be an affordable, charity-focused item. And we would never have engaged in a project like this unless we were very clear on our principles and being purpose-driven. So coming back to your question of how do you innovate when it comes to your brand, I think you have to be exceptionally clear about your brand identity and, you know, really crystallize. If you were to say this to a, and I think it's really difficult. It's really, really difficult. We are constantly struggling with our brand identity and defining it in many, many words, but we'll always say people, planet, product. And then it becomes your kind of guiding light. And we also run a children's charity called the Wings of Hope, which is very similar to One Young World in its vision of supporting young people as global influencers over time and as philanthropists over time. And I think that's it. You know, it's in our DNA. It's in my personal DNA, but it's also in our company DNA.
That's great.
Great, yeah, thank you so much. Cathy, do you want to introduce yourself and talk a bit about from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you all. It's great to be here. So as Daniela introduced, I'm representing One Young World, which for any listeners who are unfamiliar, we're the premier global forum for identifying, promoting and connecting the world's most impactful young leaders who are typically age 18 to 30. So I'd say the average age is about 26, 27, people with a bit of work experience, still idealistic at the beginning of their careers, but some experience of work and of the corporate world. So our mission, since we were founded in 2010, has always been to create a better world with more responsible and more effective leadership. So every year, the One Young World Summit, which is our flagship annual event, convenes up to 2,000 young people from over 190 global businesses, NGOs and educational institutions. And they participate in a life-changing 4-day program. So they're counselled through that by influential global speakers. Some names include Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Emma Watson, Bill Clinton, the late Kofi Annan, Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, and many others. And many of the partner companies and organisations that send delegates to the One Young World Summit also contribute to branded scholarship places. So we actually have now about 450 scholarships that were provided for our last summit, which took place in London in 2019. And those scholarships were worth a total of more than £1.7 million. Our ultimate goal in the next few years is to have 50% of our delegates attending on scholarship places. And they're supported, as I say, by the companies that already send their own internal delegations. So what we are developing through One Young World is young and engaged employees who already want to do something impactful, but they go to the One Young World Summit, they meet other young leaders from all around the world, they hear these incredible speakers, and they're inspired to go back to their organisation and to do more and to be more of the change that they all want to see in the world. whether that's within their organisation, whether it's branching out on their own and starting their own project. So my day-to-day role at One Young World is actually running a competitive host city bid process to secure host cities for the future One Young World Summit. So in January and February this year, just before lockdown, that took me to site visits in places as varied as San Jose in Costa Rica, which has incredible sustainability credentials, Montreal in Canada, which is such a creative and vibrant city, Kigali in Rwanda, which has incredible lessons to share with the world around peace and reconciliation following the genocide in 1994, and Belfast in Northern Ireland, which has got an amazing spirit as well, and similarly lessons around peace and reconciliation. And given that we have delegates coming from everywhere in the world, these stories that these cities have to offer can be incredibly inspiring for people who are living in societies where peace has not yet been achieved, and can often provide a roadmap and an ambition for how they can move forward and the change that they can play a part in. So previous summits have been held in places as widely spread as Bogota, Bangkok, Dublin, Zurich, Johannesburg, and others. But of course, in the business of big live events and international delegations, we've had to adapt our plans for 2020 in response to COVID-19. So we've actually postponed our 2020 summit, which will be in Munich. And instead of being in October 2020, that will now take place in April 2021. And there's been a knock-on effect through that for the upcoming host cities as well. But in the run-up, we've really expanded our programme of virtual events, which were already very strong. But one series that we've created has been the #TogetherApart series, where we continue to highlight the work of inspiring leaders and change makers and to connect our community with experts. So that's people such as Formula One champion Lewis Hamilton, Cameron Kasky, who's the co-founder of March for Our Lives in the US, and inclusive design writer and activist Sinead Burke, among business leaders and policy professionals. So these speakers have had a forum, whether on Instagram Live or Zoom or other platforms, where we've paired them with one of our One Young World ambassadors, which is the name that we give to our delegates. So once you attend the One Young World Summit as a delegate and you graduate at the end of the 4 days, you become a One Young World ambassador. And our community is now incredibly 12,000 plus ambassadors strong. So we've selected ambassadors to pair with high profile speakers through our #TogetherApart series to continue the conversation around COVID-19, to combat fake news, and to consider together how we will kind of rebuild going forward in this new kind of economic and social and health normal. So beyond One Young World, another project that I'm involved in is the Blossom Awards, that I've recently co-founded with Alan Mack, who is the first ever UK Member of Parliament from the British Chinese community or with Chinese heritage. So the Blossom Awards is to celebrate the successes and contributions of the British Chinese community, which is 400,000 people strong, and everything that they do to contribute to the national life of the UK. So for that, we're working with some big brands, sponsors and partners, including the Barclay Group, Coutts, Value Retails, Bicester Village, the Shopping Village in Oxfordshire, Capita, Pearson, Heathrow Airport, and others, to recognise excellence in Chinese people and their professional journeys. So that's people in public service, entrepreneurship, culture, music and the arts, and more. We actually began the Blossom Awards pre-COVID-19, but the initiative has taken on an added urgency and significance, I think, given the increase in incidents of discrimination that have been suffered among the British Chinese and other British Asian communities since the start of this year. So all being well, the awards will culminate in March 2021 with our awards ceremony and dinner, which will be held in central London. So I think we're really excited now to get to that point and announce the winners in this inaugural year.
Congratulations on your new venture. And
thank you. Yeah.
going to have a packed 2021, as I think we all feel like we're backing up into. It's going to be a very busy year. But that sounds amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. So we've heard a lot about building back better, and obviously you've touched on that, Cathy. But in terms of what that looks like, and building back better, I guess, means different things to different people. It'd be really interesting to hear. Maybe we go back, Smruti, and sort of in terms of not just your business, but a kind of a vision. You've touched on the 3 Ps. How does that look going forward as you see it?
It's a difficult one, but I know that the 3 Ps will stay very much core to us. We're already thinking about new products that we can offer that can support the mass market in appreciating sustainable products a bit better and engaging with them. So we have many sort of battle axes that we're wielding against areas in our consumer life where we're wasting a lot. So where is there a lot of waste, and where can we then provide a product solution as well as a campaign solution? I think the face coverings have been a really interesting journey because we still see a lot of single-use plastic masks being worn by the public, but as we see more and more sustainable, more and more visuals of animals and sea marine life being caught in single-use PPE, which really should be worn in the medical field, where it's then disposed of correctly and incinerated. I think the public will start to become more aware of the plastic pollution that really gripped the likes of Blue Planet and our nation. And so we are wielding our battle axe on our next sort of products that can help reduce single-use waste in other product categories.
Great. And Cathy, in terms of One Young World and Blossom, building back better?
Yeah, thank you. I think first, from a One Young World perspective, we really would like to continue to see investment in young leaders. So right at the beginning of the crisis, One Young World recognised that the pandemic, being a global crisis, really demands a global response. And after that first week or two of lockdown, when we talk about putting our own oxygen mask on first and then helping others, we thought about how we could do that, how we could help others. And we started by surveying 1,000 young people from over 65 countries to gather information on how they've been affected by COVID-19. Really encouragingly, the survey results told us that 72% of young people had volunteered their time to help others during the pandemic. But less encouragingly, 2/3 considered that their government had not adequately addressed their concerns on the pandemic. So we know from our work with One Young World, both at the summit and throughout the year, that our delegates and ambassadors are working on projects, often in very challenging circumstances, but with really innovative methods, and towards kind of combating the coronavirus on the front lines. So we launched a fund, which is the COVID-19 Young Leaders Fund from One Young World, to direct money to leaders on the front lines, young leaders, to ensure that resources are being accessed by those who need them most. And you could ask the question, why young leaders? But from our experience, young leaders today are the most connected, informed and resourceful generation in human history, and their capacity that we see for innovation, for uptake of digital tools, and their high levels of social responsibility can ensure that they're creating and implementing policies to ensure youth-friendly health services, and can really make them powerful actors in addressing humanitarian challenges. And from One Young World, we have the largest corporate footprint of any European NGO, so the most support from business. And that gives us unmatched levels of expertise when it comes to executing and kind of monitoring the impact of these One Young World Ambassador projects. So the COVID Fund has been a great success. In terms of funding, United Way and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation were the first contributors to the fund. We're also supported by the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Youth and the World Health Organization's General Special Envoy for COVID-19. And we've had support as well from the IKEA Foundation and the Zurich Foundation. For the recipients, they're very global, as is all of our work. And we've had 18 ambassador projects that have been supported so far. For me personally, I've been supporting a really fantastic recipient organisation in India, which is called Every Infant Matters. And this is run by a frontline doctor who's working all hours in hospitals in Delhi with COVID-19 patients. But she has a not-for-profit organisation that she founded, which through the crisis is providing hand sanitizers, face shields, protective gloves and so on to frontline healthcare workers, and also distributing grocery packs to migrant workers who've lost their job through the crisis. So she does incredible work, and the impact that we're seeing through the monitoring process. At the moment, it includes kind of thank you letters from hospitals and other organisations and institutions where she's helped, and photos and videos. And similar to Smruti's 3 Ps, I guess, for our criteria, we've got the 3 Us. So our focus really for the summit, for the COVID Young Leaders Fund, is firstly urgent. So where can the funds be put to work immediately in order to save lives and to stop the spread? So looking at the applications for funding, it has to be that urgent need in a community and the ability of the organisation, their capacity to respond quickly. I think when we started the fund in April, we possibly thought that the pandemic wouldn't be ongoing for as long as it is. So I think there's less of an urgent need now to kind of distribute the funding. But it is still really important to see that there is that strong need. The second U is utilitarian. So where will the funds be used to help the most people? And the third is underdeserved. So which communities may not already be receiving the assistance that they need. So we're looking for achievable and instantly actionable projects that we can support. But that investment in young leaders is really what drives us. It's our mission and our impact report. It's just great to be able to support these projects. And I think for myself and other people working within the team as well, to feel like you're supporting something that is very quickly and very kind of markedly impacting people's lives through this crisis is really rewarding as well. So yeah, it's been a fantastic project to get involved in, and I think a really great way that we've been able to kind of pivot in this crisis to something that's outside of our normal kind of summit cycle of having our event every 12 months, and do something that is really wide-ranging, and can hopefully lay the foundations for a better future as well during this crisis and once it's over.
That's great. Thanks very much, Cathy. And maybe following up on that, obviously you're doing a lot of great work at One Young World. You have a lot of companies that are involved in One Young World, a lot of brands who come along to your summit, who get involved, who send delegations of young people. And in our first seminar, just 3 weeks ago, we had our youth panel. And one of the things that came up in that discussion was the importance of companies engaging authentically on major social issues. And, obviously with COVID, all sorts of social issues have come out of that, which need to be addressed. And I just wondered, asking you first and then Smruti from a brand perspective, how you think organisations can really engage with key audiences authentically on this issue, and what you've seen with some of the companies that you've been involved with One Young World, how those how they've been able to engage with those particularly demanding young audiences, and how that model of partnerships fits into building that level of trust.
Sure, yeah. I think a really great example here is Lead 2030, which was formed by One Young World as the world's biggest prize fund for young leaders who are making an impact specifically towards the Sustainable Development Goals. So in developing countries alone, there's an estimated annual investment gap of $2.5 trillion towards achieving the global goals. And to bridge this gap requires a really meaningful contribution from the private sector. So what Lead 2030 does is it's powered by some of the world's leading businesses. So AstraZeneca, Deloitte, Asahi, Standard Chartered, Credit Suisse, and others. and it finds, funds and accelerates SDG solutions created by founders who again are under the age of 30. So each winner, and the winners are tied to a specific SDG, receives $50,000 in funding, in addition to a 12-month program of executive mentorship. And that program is specifically tailored to the needs of their selected project. So we have projects focusing on ending extreme poverty, on protecting the oceans, and just really tackling some of the world's most pressing issues. So we run that competition every year, and that again is a really great way to engage brands and companies really kind of on the front lines with young people and the great work that they're doing, and to give a platform for these young people as well to make their work have an even greater impact, and reach more people as well, both in the message and the deliverables. In terms of through the year, we hear a lot of stories of our ambassadors, as I touched on before, kind of going back after the summit and thinking, wow, you know, this is incredible. My life, kind of my whole perspective has been changed. I need to do more. And the people who kind of go back to their company and have the support of their superiors at work in creating a project, it is really great as well. So just a couple of examples. At Waitrose in the United Kingdom, we have an ambassador from Waitrose called Danielle, who after the One Young World Summit and her participation, she was on the core team in delivering an industry-leading packaging reduction initiative called Waitrose Unpacked. So this was launched in Oxford, first of all, in summer 2019, and it saw more than 200 products removed from their packaging to test how customers might be prepared to shop differently in the future. So also saving thousands of tons of unnecessary plastic. And it tested the largest range of loose fruit and veg of any national supermarket. There were 28 varieties of dried goods to buy from refill dispensers, frozen fruits pick and mix, and coffee to dispense and grind in store, and beers and wines on tap. And customers were encouraged to bring their own containers or were able to borrow reusable ones in store. So it was initially run for 11 weeks, but there was an overwhelmingly positive response, which saw the trial extended and introduced into 3 further stores by the end of the year. So that's one example of someone kind of going back from the summit. Another is Polycycle in Germany with BMW, which increased the use of recycled material from old fishing nets and industrial waste as an alternative to crude oil. So through this project, One Young World ambassadors at BMW managed to implement recycled materials in the carpet of 2 million future BMWs. So they've developed new floor mats, and the materials for those are 100% recyclable. So the vision's to make new floor mats out of old floor mats as well. And it not only decreases the carbon footprint, but it led to other circular economy projects and inspired many colleagues as well to act in similar ways. And I think a more direct anecdote from my day-to-day role at One Young World is when we went to Belfast in February for the site visit, when Belfast was competing to be a future One Young World host city. Belfast sent a delegation to our One Young World London Summit in October, and a large number of those participants actually came to an event at Stormont, the Northern Ireland Assembly, where we were hosted as part of the site visit this year. And just speaking about the kind of small and bigger changes that they've made in their lives since the summit was really great to hear as well. And also the way that they kind of support each other. So whether it's someone who loves to travel, who now kind of thinks a lot more about her own individual carbon footprint, and educates their family and friends on that issue as well. Or people who are doing incredible projects around education and youth work in some kind of communities where they're kind of at-risk young people around Belfast. Yeah, there's lots of stories like that as well. So it's really great when we're looking at host cities for the future to see where we already have engaged communities of previous One Young World delegates, because they're really the cheerleaders for bringing One Young World to their city and kind of ultimately for making it a success. And actually the head of the Belfast bid team was a One Young World delegate in Bogota in 2017. He spoke on stage, and he actually spoke on the same stage as Kofi Annan. And when he left the stage, he said to our founder, Kate Robertson, and there's a video, you can kind of see him saying something to her without sound, without the audio. He said, I'm bringing this to Belfast. And I mean, we've not made the public announcement yet, but it's looking promising for a future Belfast Summit. So that's really inspiring as well for what he's done in the meantime, and now what he's looking to do for other young people in Belfast as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. And Smruti, from the brand perspective, from your brand, obviously you talked about the 3 Ps earlier on, and having the importance of that brand and really engaging authentically on those principles. How do you think you can engage with those key audiences and sort of obviously with, as you said, face coverings. So I keep wanting to call them mask face coverings. A lot of doing things with British Council. It's also very appealing for young audiences. So can you tell me a bit about, from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we were really clear about the vision of the project to celebrate many of our 3P principles, actually. So we were really clear that we wanted to champion designers, and we're very passionate about supply chain and everyone along the supply chain being respected. So starting really from design, and then even as consumers, we have such a large part to play in how a supply chain works. We are, as consumers, you form the demand of a product within the supply chain. So we really knew that we had to engage the public in backing the campaign. And so when we built the campaign, we knew that celebrating British design would be absolutely critical. And we've been partners of the British Fashion Council for many, many years. And it really has been through years of working together in a very trusted way that we were able to very quickly create that partnership. And this was the first time the BFC had ever engaged in a mass product offer. And the vision, I phoned up the CEO and I said, look, I want to raise £1 million because I really feel that, designers really need the support. You've had cancelled orders from retailers across the world. Designers' order books have just vanished overnight. And really fashion is such a lofty industry with beautiful aesthetics, but actually the hard work that goes into creating beautiful design and celebrating humankind at its best involves many hardworking business owners who've taken a real punt and who've actually been left very financially devastated by this crisis. So I knew that the fashion industry really needed the support, even though it has such a glossy exterior. And we chose the NHS charities together for the obvious reason that we were making a face covering, and my husband's a doctor and I wanted to support the NHS as best as we could. And the Wings of Hope Children's Charity, the future is young. One Young World, I think, is the core principles of One Young World. It very much feeds into the core principles of the Wings of Hope Children's Charity. And we just sit with a different, much younger age group of 13 to 20-year-olds, whereas you take over with the 18 to 30-year-olds. And I think I'm always very passionate about young people because they have a very positive outlook. If you give them the opportunity to take hold of a project and to lead a project, they have an incredible sense of energy. And often we kind of belittle young people and don't think much that they can create something out of nothing, but often they outshine, and it's because they're in a learning mode, they're in a student mode. So when we launched the Face Coverings project, we knew that we wanted to have 3 designers. We ended up having 6, which was very difficult to manage. We ended up working with 3 charities, and our aim was to raise £1 million. And we really worked in a very clear manner to onboard retailers who would be happy to forsake the profits from the product and give it all to charity. And it was a very cogent and coherent piece that we could then sell to press. sell to the British public. But something that has been really interesting, I remember speaking to some of my buyers and they said, how is this going to be packaged? And, you know, when you're developing a product, you know, sometimes you're just so focused on the product, you forget about the packaging. Even though I'm a packaging woman, you know, you forgot, oh my gosh, how is this going to sit on a shelf in a supermarket? How is this going to be retailed online? And then when we had that opportunity to develop the packaging, the entire back of the packaging was free for us to communicate. And we spent a lot of time talking about the sustainability credentials. So we had a complete people and planet section, which has resonated so well with the British public. You know, we've got Instagram stories showing the packaging, reading the packaging out to the public, where we're talking about organic cotton and REACH compliant inks, which means that it's not toxic for waterways, the 90% female workforce, no single-use plastic, reusing packaging, and how the cotton panels can be compostable. And people have really engaged on that front. So what seems like a headline project of designer has actually dovetailed in sustainability and ethical manufacturing in a very neat and cogent way. So we've been really pleased that the messaging and even the design partners that we've chosen. So we have Mulberry, we have Christopher Rayburn, we have Rixo, Julie McDonald, Halpern, and Liam Hodges. So some really hard-hitting, well-known names, and then some emerging names. But Mulberry have really been leading the pack, and Rayburn have been leading the pack in terms of sustainability around material usage, reducing waste, and recycling. So you know, it has been quite a difficult process. I can't lie to you, but I really feel that if you are, you know, to the audience, if you are launching any project, and if you're not clear on the output, that's dangerous. You know, you have to be exceptionally clear, because then once you start pitching, if you're not clear, how can anyone buy into your product and buy into your principles? So even though it took a while to kind of get going, it took about 6 weeks, which in COVID is very long, but in bringing a product to market is not very long. You know, it took a long time for us to actually convince certain designers to come on board, to even convince the British Fashion Council that this was a worthwhile project. But we had a very clear vision, and I think that's been remarkable. And I'm just really pleased to see the British public and beyond actually have really latched on to the key principles. And when we've been doing some consumer surveys, you know, very key messages have come out as to why they've chosen our product over any other product. And it's a lot to do with supporting British design, a lot to do with supporting charity, and the fact that it's sustainable. And, you know, we haven't really, it's quite extraordinary. You know, the product has really touched a very wide mass consumer audience. You know, it was featured on Good Morning Britain with Lorraine and on GMTV, where people are watching daytime telly and watching it on a stylist sort of plug piece, and they've bought it, yet they've really, you know, engaged very clearly with our product principles. So it's that's the one learning that I've felt, that if we didn't have clarity in the product choice, in the material choice, in the product design, and then the packaging, the project wouldn't have been as holistic.
And it brings out that authenticity again, and how important it is, and then the response that you get from that, and really the kind of, I guess, part buy-in, but also what that looks like for the future. And, you know, knowing that these things can happen sets a standard and sets examples.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to see, you know, repeat purchases and word of mouth, and what people are latching onto as their mouthpiece, as their sort of words that they're using. You know, we've got a great celebrity kind of following of the product. You know, Nicole Scherzinger and Millie McIntosh and Oliver Proudlock and Laura Whitmer. You know, lots of A-list celebrities have been supporting the campaign. But actually, when the British public and wider are choosing to promote it on Instagram or LinkedIn or Twitter, they are choosing the 3 Ps as their ways. You know, they're not saying 3 Ps, but the core messaging really centers around it. And so as a brand owner, it warms my heart, because we've been a very behind the scenes sort of company until now. And so it's a kind of culmination of many, many years of work and beavering at these 3 Ps and sort of hoping that this sort of cute smiley faced label can actually connect with the British public and beyond, and it has.
Great. Also to be able to literally be the mouthpiece on the face covering. Never mind.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, Daniela, also we've got some other questions here that we've got about sort of 5-10 minutes, so we could ping over to some of those, and if you guys were happy to answer a couple more, that would be great.
If you're happy to do that. We've got a question from Andy here. What has been the primary deciding factor to prioritise your efforts during lockdown for the UK markets?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. What has been the primary deciding factor to prioritise your efforts during lockdown for the UK markets? Don't know if you want to take that, Smruti.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I need that repeated. So what have been our priorities for the UK market?
Yeah, what's been your primary factor to prioritise your efforts during lockdown? So what sort of made you decide, okay, this is what we're going to, how we're going to prioritise during lockdown for you?
Yeah, I mean, you know, as a business, we face, like many businesses in the UK, huge levels of uncertainty. We furloughed a lot of our workforces because we just didn't know what to do. And I think I'm really lucky. I've got a great founder community and, you know, great SME community that I tap into. And I think it was just taking it step by step. I think having very lofty business plans and, you know, 12-month forecasts, everything was sort of torn up. And you just took it as a week-to-week basis, a day-to-day basis, you know, an hourly basis sometimes. You know, we have faced exceptional crises. Managing an international supply chain is horrendous. You know, you are expecting airlines to fly in your product on time, to deliver into retailers at specific time slots, and then the airlines don't take off, or half of your consignment ends up in Qatar and half of your consignments end up in Amsterdam. You know, you're dealing with crises all the time. And I think, you know, my personal view is that I made a very, very clear commitment to our workforce in India, that I wanted to keep them afloat, and I wanted to keep them, you know, my father and I, you know, we were very clear, they are our extended family, these hundreds of people. And the Indian government weren't supportive as the British government. And we gave many months worth of food grains and food staples, you know, rice, lentils, cooking oil, sugar, these food staples just for our workforce, just to keep them going, not to have the basic stress of food, you know, plaguing them. We did lots of health checks on them for free. But to be very honest, the specific focus on the UK market was, it's our home market. So we're a really international business. You know, we trade across the world, Europe being over 50% of our business. But the UK is something, it's our home. You know, we are in the same time zone. And so it was starting little by little, and having a very big vision, but knowing that it's a big mountain to chew through. So any tip I can give is, it's really easy to listen to these sort of panels and think, gosh, this just sounds really unreachable. But, you know, I had one table, one chair, and didn't go to work. You just have one table, one chair, and you have your computer and you have your phone. What can you do with this? You know, what can you do to make something happen? Because if you've got the responsibility of a workforce sitting on your shoulders, it's on you. And, you know, and that can be petrifying, or it can be energizing. And you can think, all right, well, I have the most amazing opportunity to create a brand new product, which no one else is doing. How can I make it happen? How can you then energize your own workforce to believe in you and make it happen? But it's little small steps and following, you know, true protocol. I'll give you one example. It was just absolutely scary So we were working with Mulberry, and getting sign off from Mulberry, because they're an incredible design, digitally is challenging, you know. And we were working on this signature Mulberry print. And so the Mulberry print that we've got on our face covering is actually on a leather handbag, which is worth £800. And we really had to nail it. And we went back and forth and back and forth. And some of the protocols that we would normally implement as a business, due to speed and urgency, we sort of missed. And actually, Mulberry pushing us very hard on design and sign-off brought us back to our original principles and our standard operating procedures. So what I think can happen in a panic is that you can forget some of the core principles of running your business and the standard procedures that you've developed over many years. And it can bring you back into saying, no, go back to your principles, go back to your processes, and follow the program, because there's a reason for it. So yeah, that's my 2 pennies worth on how to sustain a crisis and why the UK market.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true in terms of getting carried away and caught up with other things, and then forget, you know, you have to kind of come back to basics and remember what's important, why you started a business in the first place. Cathy, any perspectives from you in terms of, you know, from One Young World or Blossom as well, in terms of the, you know, decision to prioritise your efforts? You talked before about pivoting to virtual events, etc.
Yeah, and I think with the virtual events, our priority has really been to kind of maintain that momentum that we have with our community. We're so used to working on this 12-month cycle of having a One Young World Summit in October, and then we kind of take stock, and then we, you know, build back up again to the next year. And kind of by elongating the cycle this year, by pushing back 6 months, it's actually, you know, there are all these terrible things that are happening in the world, but I guess one silver lining internally is that it's given us more time to create projects, still very focused on our core values, but projects that we otherwise might not have done, certainly this year, or even for a few years. So one of those is the One Young World Academy, which I didn't mention before, but because the One Young World Munich Summit will take place in April next year, in October this year, when we would have been in Munich, we're actually launching a really world-class program of online lectures. So there's an opportunity for our delegates, if they sign up by October, to have that online learning and program, and there's marking, and there are some amazing prizes as well for kind of coursework and other submissions. And we're running that with some top universities as well. So that's something that, yeah, we just would not have done this year, but which we expect will kind of continue to be a big part of our offering going forward. But as Smruti said, it's about kind of sticking to your principles, staying engaged with our community, supporting our community as well to help others in the ways that they can, and giving them all the resources to really kind of, you know, double, triple their impact that they're having. So yeah, the virtual stuff has really kind of it's just complemented our wider work, and as I say, it's also worked to kind of put out informative, real news out there as well, to kind of set the record straight on a lot of the kind of policy points and health points as well, that we're kind of talking about in the last few months.
It's great as well that we've seen so much around community at this time. I think it's been something that has underpinned each of the talks that we've had on this series, that community is such an important, I mean, it's something, you know, we live and practice within our own communities, but I think COVID and the pandemic and the way that we've had to, businesses as well as friends and families and sort of extended families, have had to kind of come together. And it's actually, I think it's one of the more beautiful parts to see at a time of crisis, is that bringing together and supporting.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the, you know, similar or shared experiences that we're having in every country in the world as well. And we're all going through this at the same time. We're all kind of sheltering at home, or have been for many months. So there's a real kind of community around that as well.
Great. Maybe just one more question quickly, and then from Grace, what's your top tip for taking great creative ideas and translating these into actions? That's a good question.
It's like the classic question, right? You know, you can have an idea a minute, but the key piece is to realize that timing is very important. And sometimes you've just got to do a quick SWOT, you know, a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, like a classic business school kind of thing, matrix. And so you say, okay, what is my idea? Who is my customer, or who is my audience? What do I want to say to them? How do I want to say it? And who else is talking about it? And you know, the actions have got to be really granular. I think the devil is really in the detail. It's very easy for someone to come up with a grand, lofty idea, but very, very few people can actually put it into action and take it from A to Z. You know, perseverance and endurance are key qualities of, you know, successful sports people, successful business leaders, successful politicians. You know, just keep going, just keep pedaling. It may be that you have to change your direction a little bit here or there, but having an end destination is absolutely critical. And I think loose creative ideas can be dangerous. I mean, you obviously have to start from a blank canvas and tease it out, but it's important to have details. So you have your headline, you create your SWOT, you understand who you're communicating to and who you're selling to effectively. But then to also understand every single minutiae involved. You know, for example, let me tell you, just to create this face covering involves over 40 different processes. And each critical component is a process. And if you don't have that element, you don't have a product. I was listening to this incredible podcast with AstraZeneca, who are currently, you know, the key partners of the vaccine with Oxford University, and they've already started producing 100,000 vials of the vaccine that if it gets approved will go into general circulation. But one of the key and critical components which they are struggling with and that they're having to work with are glass vials. You know, it's not the actual key, it's not the vaccine itself, but it's the actual little tube that the vaccine's going to come into. And who would have thought that glass vials could be the Achilles heel of this entire campaign? So when you have a creative idea, you've really got to, in fact, you will not forecast every single roadblock that you'll come across. But if you can break it down, that will help you charge action. That will help you prioritize who do I need to speak to, when and how. Because otherwise it can be very overwhelming.
Absolutely. And who knew?
Yeah, exactly. That's great. Cathy, any thoughts from you on that question?
Yeah, I'd echo all of that, and just say, just to start now. I think there's a saying that if you start today, then 3 months from now you'll look back and you'll be glad that you did. And just keep persevering, be positive. And there's a lot of support out there as well for people who are starting their own business, particularly. I think, as Smruti said earlier, there are lots of founders communities, certainly across London and in the UK. And a lot of that support has become digital as well during the pandemic. I know myself that I've watched a lot of Enterprise Nation kind of lunchtime learning webinars as well, which are around kind of all sorts of business topics, whether it's kind of back-end stuff or marketing on various kind of social media channels. So yeah, find your supportive community, and yeah, just keep going with it. I think for us with the Blossom Awards and creating this awards, it has been kind of a long project that led up to us launching nominations in April this year. We did consider maybe pushing that back because there was so much kind of negative news, so much bad news in April. We wondered whether our message of asking British Chinese people to nominate themselves, to kind of reflect on their heritage, to write about their work achievements, we just wonder whether that would be able to get through. But I think in terms of kind of turning that into an action, I'm really glad that we kind of stuck with that original timeline, because the feedback we've had from people is that it's just been a great exercise for them, and just kind of pause and think, and just to fill out the application form. And now we've seen, you know, a lot of nominations coming in. We've been really happy with the kind of response that we've had, and reading them's been kind of really uplifting as well. And now we're at a point where we're looking to pass those over to the judges over the summer. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that, you know, just keep moving forward. Every small step kind of gets you towards the eventual goal.
That's great. Yeah, we need as many actions and good news as we can do right now. Great. Well, I think that's all we've got time for. Chloe, there was one final comment, I think, from someone you wanted to.
Well, I just saw it was a lovely piece here from Eduardo, just saying that the speakers have hit the marks in terms of what they do and the flexibility and remembering your own brand identity and values and principles and purpose. So I think that kind of sums up where this journey of the past hour has taken us to, and it's to just say thank you very much for being part of this, and for attending, and for the people watching, and for the people who will watch once it's up on the PRCA website.